Hello, this is Nick from Breaker Press Games, and I want to talk to you about last night's session of DCC. This is Jenulane Campaign Diary in regards to session number 2 of our brand new campaign. So, I recorded this video once already, and I went into a lot of minutia focusing on things that I was thinking about, and I decided to redo this instead, talking about what the players did. With that being said, Shane's characters are Ebobo and Maddog. And in the last session, in session number 1, there was a prison break, and there was this huge battle that took place. One of his characters, Maddog, ended up getting knocked out, and his other character, Ebobo, was dragging him out of the gate at the end of the session. And the rest of the party had made the decision that they were going to surrender to Glendale, Jenulane, and the protectorate. Ultimately, I started the session with Shane and wanted to know what he did immediately after that moment. And he dragged Ebobo, dragged Maddog out of the gate, saw that it was a new moon and had the cover of darkness, and decided to drag Maddog, who was unconscious, to the edge of the knoll that the tower is built upon, and drag him down into the woods and conceal him and try and make it through the night. He went through a whole survival arc. Make it through the night. Next morning, go searching for herbs and berries and water in order to survive. And I really liked how Shane played Ebobo, in that Bobo is a book binder, and a failed book binder, I should say, because he really focuses on the collection of books. And so he ends up making a series of successful rolls in order to find things necessary for survival and to get Maddog ultimately, slowly, back on his feet. We will get back to Ebobo and Maddog in a moment. So then we go to Alex, and Alex's character, one remaining character, Rawn Duo. And Rawn Duo was one of the characters that chose to surrender to the protectorate. And so I played up this, tried to build some tension, both in that I walked them through how after their surrender, the remaining protectorate guards, because they had effectively, they were winning. At the end of when they chose to surrender, they surrendered when they were actually succeeding in the prison break. They had killed a bunch of the protectorate guards thanks to Tom Branson's character, or to Jaina's character, Tom Branson, the insurrectionist, and they were poised to escape and to be allowed to escape. And Glendale Jenulane, the drunken blowhard that is the master at arms and the noble of the house, comes down the steps and says, you are great fighters. You should, join us, and we will give you clemency. And they took the deal. I was astounded when the session ended with that, but they did. And so, but I can't make it easy. I have to make sure that we play up the angles that, one, the Protectorate of Jenulane is the symbol of power in the region, even if they were very successful in their attempted prison break, and two, the guards and the persons at arms at the Tower of Jenulane are not going to like and be comfortable with a bunch of criminals being allowed to essentially join them. And so I played up the moments of as Brennan, the tower squire, is taking the Rawn Duo and Tom Branson through the tower, offering them quarters, offering the other debtor insurrectionists that Tom Branson had raised from the other cells, which were a big part of their success. Offering them offering them rooms and food. Ultimately, Rawn Duo, who is a smuggler by trade, who is guilty of he was guilty of disorder. He got into a fight with the protectorate guards, and that was what he was in the cell for in the first place. And here he is now being offered a room and food and lodging. Tom Branson, which is Dana's character, was a house servant that had been guilty of raising, trying to fight for a better life within the house that he served, and trying to organize labor. And that was his disorder and why he was put in a cell beneath the Tower of Jenulane. And of course, he ultimately, used that in order to turn the other debtors or the other criminals within the cells to join the party in order to take on the protectorate during this prison break. And so Dana played Tom Branson to the hilt. He was argumentative with Brennan as Brennan's offering him lodging. He makes the decision that he's going to stay in the cells in solidarity instead of taking the nice lodging and the food, and keeps raising all sorts of questions about what his future will be and what the future of the workers will be, going forward. And of course, Brennan is just Glendale Jenulane's squire, and Glendale has gone back to his room to drink himself to sleep, because that is what he does. And so Tom Branson, was very he kept me on my toes as in my improv, because he just kept hammering with questions and trying to fight for a better conditions for the prisoners. So we go to the next day, and I'm continuing to ramp up the tension, or attempting to do so. They are the only ones that can judge whether I succeeded. But essentially, with Tom Branson's demands, word was given that when Candace Keykeeper returns, that is when you will be able to negotiate your terms. And so we go through another day of survival for Ebobo and Maddog. We go back to Rawn Duo, or I should say, we go to the moment where Candace Keykeeper returns to the tower, striding in with her eye patch and a scar underneath her eye. She talks to Brennan in hushed tones, gives a sour expression as she glares across the tower and the nave and the bloodstains and the prisoners that are being used to scrub the bloodstains in the tower from the battle 2 days before. And we go to the next morning, and Maddog and Ebobo are basically kind of continuing that survival story. Rawn Duo, he is summoned. He is taken out of the tower, being led by Brennan and 4 of the protectorate guards, and is taken to a scene. Behind the tower, there is a stump, a blood-stained tree stump with the insignia of Gorhan the Helmed Vengeance engraved into the rings at the top of the stump. There is a carpet or a pad upon which a person could kneel, and across from the stump and across from the kneeling mat is a bench, and the bench has an open seat, Candace Keykeeper, Chaplain Derman, and a brazier smoking full of hot coals and a branding iron. And so Rawn Duo, Alex, is in this position where he doesn't know what's coming. We hadn't, role played through one of these interrogations yet, and so he is brought to the stump, made to kneel, and Candace Keykeeper hits him with a series of questions. And it just so happens that in the real world, I have been conducting interviews with the I sit on a board for an organization, and the board members have been helping out with interviews, and so I'm kind of in interview mode. And so when I came up with the idea to do this, it just felt really natural. And so ultimately, Candace Keykeeper, asks Rawn Duo what crimes he's accused of, and he admits that he's accused of fighting the protectorate and punching a guard or what have you. He is asked whether he is asked. I'm going to look this up because I have it up on the screen. He is asked, why should you be granted mercy? And he gives an explanation as to why he is granted mercy. Of course, being a smuggler, he gives a blatant, bold-faced lie, but that is what he chooses to do. And then he is asked, how do you intend to serve House Jenulane and Gorhan the Helmed Vengeance? And so he gives a rudimentary explanation, and Candace Keykeeper comes over to the brazier, heats up the branding iron, and informs Rawn Duo that essentially, and I'm going to go back to my notes, you will be marked as a sign of your commitment. When your debt has been paid, the mark will fade. If you break Gorhan's trust, your wound will inflame and begin to fester. You cannot cheat Gorhan of his divine justice. And so, with that, Rawn Duo is branded with a mark, with the promise that the mark will fade if he performs an act of service for Gorhan. So we go through that, and he is led back to the tower. And then we go to the argumentative insurrectionist, Dana's Tom Branson. And so Tom Branson, of course, first refuses to go to leave the cell without his fellow criminals that he had rallied. He wanted, the strength of numbers of labor, of the workers, of the poor and huddled masses, and of course, the protectorate, Brennan, as the arbitrator of this exchange, refuses and says this is not what Candace Keykeeper had told him to do. And so there is a back and forth where negotiations are made, where the workers are given, the debtors are given food. They are given the ability to go with whatever Tom Branson negotiates. They are essentially putting the power of basically making Tom Branson the union head or the union steward, able to negotiate in their stead. And so, even though this is not what Dana envisions for Tom Branson, after enough back and forth, he agrees. And so they lead Tom Branson up and before Candace Keykeeper, and of course he refuses to kneel. He eventually kneels. There is a ton of back and forth between him and Candace Keykeeper, and a lot of negotiating. It was some of the hardest role play I have done, not from the standpoint of like funny voices or whatever, because I didn't use funny voices, but trying to crank through how to make this negotiation and make it feel real. And so we do a ton of back and forth, and ultimately Tom Branson agrees to be branded and agrees to take on this an agreement, an oath of fealty to the House Jenulane, but only if somebody else from the house agrees to essentially the same punishment. And so Candace looks at Brennan, the squire. Brennan kneels before the stump, and Brennan is branded in the same way that Tom Branson was about to. And so his will having been fulfilled, his wants satiated, Tom Branson agrees to be branded. So we go back to Ebobo and Maddog. And so they are waiting for an opportunity. There is, outside of the tower, there is a stable building. He's watching the deliveries that come during the day. Bread arrives, and he's considering stealing the bread, but it seems too risky. And so he's waiting for the stable hand to go out of sight at some point. And there is this perfect moment, because in the NPC dynamic in Protectorate of Jenulane, Brennan and Tala Maregroomer are friends. And so since Brennan passes out when he is branded at the will of Candace Keykeeper and Tom Branson, it made sense for, as he's being dragged into the tower, for Ms. Maregroomer to see this and go to check on Brennan and find out what happened. And so in this moment, Ebobo, stealthily, or as stealthily as a bookbinder can, sneaks across the yard during the changing of the guard and all of the confusion that's going on in the moment, and sneaks into the stables, has a moment of compassion where he sees that there is a bushel full of pears, and he gives each of the horses and the pony, there's 3 horses and a pony, he gives each of them a pear, and then keeps 2 for himself. And then he's looking to see where Ms. Maregroomer's lodging is, and notices that there is a ladder going up to the loft, and that there is a hatch. And so he goes up the ladder, and he is opening the hatch, first checking for traps. Not a thief, but still checking for traps, and then opening it, and of course it goes because he rolled really poorly, and though there's no traps, it creaked very loudly. And so we go through a great back and forth. He gets up into the loft apartment and is searching around for anything that would be useful but would not give away his presence. And so he ends up finding like a spare cloak and a couple of other things, but does not disturb any of the things that are like in plain sight. He then hears her coming back across the yard from the tower to the stables, and he makes his desperate escape. There's a lot of good tension in the moment. He ends up hanging out of the window, rolls a 20 for strength for his strength check as he's hanging from the window. It was pretty awesome, but then he knows that that his character is not a stealthy character, and so pushes off to try and fall in, as he put it, belly flop into a pile of hay, and he ends up making his check, not getting injured in any way, just barely misses the pitchfork, as I said, and he makes his escape back into the woods. And so that is the overview of everything that took place yesterday. So what are the things that I took away from the experience? Well, number one, I had to deal with a split party. And not a split party where, one person sneaks off to do one thing for a little bit. This is half of the party's in the tower and has agreed to one thing, and half of the party in this particular session is outside of the tower and has no plans to go back into the tower. And so I had prepared a bunch of written material for those that were going to be in the tower because I knew that was a known quantity. What Shane was going to do when him being free, he could have gone to one of the neighboring towns, gone on an adventure on his own, but he chose to stay and go through this whole survival montage. And I thought that was great. And it allowed me to get a sense of his characters, for him to get a sense of his characters, and also at the same time be able to give him moments of spotlight in an episode where each of the characters was going to have to get some deliberate spotlight. Which leads me to the interrogation. And I am somebody that comes from the school of old school D&D. My personal loves are killing monsters and getting killed by traps, and going through, solving puzzles, that sort of thing. I'm not very well versed in deep improv. And so this was going to be a challenge for me. But because I pulled in my experiences, I've been a manager at a bunch of different places, and I've had to do interviews in the past, and I'm in that mode where, as a board member of this organization that I work for, I was doing interviews. And so interviews just came naturally. And so I just adopted a mindset for Candace Keykeeper and was able to, conduct this interview in a way that I felt was in the very firmly placed in the character of Candace Keykeeper. One of my players, Alex, had commented that he thought Candace Keykeeper was going to be much meaner, and that was echoed by the other members of the party. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that I played her out of character, I should say. You'll just have to get to know her. But I think that as a thing, I was really concerned with how they reacted to it. I was worried that maybe they would think that it wasn't fun, because it was something that was very out of the ordinary for how I run sessions, which generally focus on combat and travel and exploration, and traps and puzzles and things. And so it was a different sort of session, but it was a rewarding session, and I think it was rewarding to them. Shane had made the comment at the end of the session that he thinks that that's what role-playing is, and we can get in a whole discussion about lowercase role-playing or RP versus uppercase role-playing or RP. I definitely am more in the lowercase role-playing camp in how I play and how I see things, but I know that other people are in the uppercase RP, and I want to entertain my players. And so I am happy that he enjoyed that and wants more of that, and I will make sure to give that to them. The last thing I want to talk about is the mark. The mark of deferred justice. And so they were each given this brand, and that brand is going to stay with them. And I have the ability that if I want to plant a hook for them as a group, I could, because the mark would... it won't compel them. They have their free will. It's just that they will suffer consequences if they choose to not pursue whatever quest they are given. Think of it as, instead of in the Running Man, the neck thing that would kill them instantly, but instead a slow, painful death. But gives you the opportunity to change course. Whereas in the Running Man, you can't change course. So that's set up, and I could do it as a group thing for all of them, or I could stagger different strong hooks as we go. And that's kind of where I'm leaning. We'll have to see what Bobby does, because Bobby was not present for the session, so his characters, Rosa and Vlad, have not been dealt with yet, and so we've got to work that out. And then those hooks are not going to be something that is relevant to what is going on with Maddog and Ebobo, as they are outside of the tower, and Ebobo as the book-obsessed bookbinder, the book collector, is definitely going in a wizard direction, and there's going to have to be a separate hook that works for him. And so I'm really excited to see where these next couple of sessions are going to go. These are all really, really interesting characters, and I'm really looking forward to it. That is my campaign diary for session number 2. Thank you for watching. If you want to support my work and this content, we have a web store. We have the Patreon. You can, of course, just like and subscribe. We love that. And retweet or share on social media of your choice. Yeah, all of that is a huge benefit to what we're doing here. Allows for all of this to take place. And yeah, as always, thank you for supporting indie games and indie game designers. This is Nick from Breaker Press Games, signing off. Bye.